Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Fiona and I'm the Festival Producer at Wiltshire Creative. I'm thrilled to introduce our first Artist of the Week as part of the Wiltshire Creative Connects programme, Mirka Golden-Hann. Mirka, hello.
Hello.
Now we'll be delving into your practice as an artist and hearing about some highlights and challenges that you've met along the way. But as we can't avoid the lockdown in our discussion, I wondered if you could tell me how, as an artist, you've responded to the lockdown and being away from your studio.
That's, yes, very interesting question. It really came quite strongly to me that the moment I had to leave the studio, and I never was without a studio before, I kind of started to tap into something which is very basic. How will I provide for my family? And one of the first things I did was found old Czech sauerkraut making pot and went to panic buy some cabbage, so that even if the worst comes to worst, we will have some vitamin C in the house, and some food. And the other things I also did is kind of found a little time to reflect and look back, and I wrote a story, which is something I haven't done for decades. And actually this story I gave to my daughter for her 16th birthday. I think she hates me. And I don't know, I haven't really found it as bad as I think some people are finding it, because it does allow me a time to take a step back, reflect, but also time to spend with my family, which I wouldn't otherwise have. And in terms of creativity, there are so many things that can be done around the house. I think one of the first things I have actually done was hang up 24 hard handling gloves on my washing line after washed them into an installation which was titled "On a Nice Sunny Day I Hanged Up My Hard Handling Gloves," and that was posted on Instagram and generated quite a lively conversation with a wider artistic community. So those sort of things I've been up to, and other projects hatching up in my head.
I'm glad you're finding the positives in being able to sort of pause and just have that reset moment. Now, I wonder if you could tell us why clay?
So I grew up in former Czechoslovakia, and as a child, I wasn't really steered in the direction of visual arts or any sort of creativity of that sort. My father really wanted me to have the opportunity to go to travel, and one way of doing that was through becoming a very good musician. So I was being pushed quite a lot in that direction, and unfortunately I didn't make that dream come true for my father. I was quite a rebellious youngster. As a young teenager, I was really fortunate to get a job in the summer on archaeological excavations in a little village called Velem. It was a Middle Bronze Age site, and it was very rich in beaker culture, ceramics, very heavily decorated. And I was really struck by the fact that there I am, face to face with a creativity of somebody who lived 1,300 years BC. It's incredible. And since then, I was really curious about ceramics, but I haven't had an opportunity to touch clay until when I came to live in England, already married, age 19. I would not recommend that, in 1993. And yes, we came to live in Cambridge, and I enrolled on an evening class at the Chesterton Community College. And I particularly remember the feeling I had when I first worked with clay. It felt like I've done it before. I really had a connection with the material, and I hadn't really looked back since. Yes, it was incredible, and so from then on, I also found a potter. She taught me more in depth in exchange for looking after her children, and at the same time, I had a job at Cambridge University Library, which was wonderful because it's one of the copyright libraries in the UK, and any question you have, that library has an answer. So it was great time for me.
Wow, it's fascinating to hear that that sort of journey into knowing what you wanted to do as an adult, you didn't get that until slightly later in life, and I think we're all really encouraged, aren't we, too early to sort of know what to do. So I think that's brilliant to hear that you didn't know, and here you are. Now, in terms of that sort of adult education, what was that like going back into the classroom, and what was the teaching like?
It was really liberating experience to be learning in an environment where you are working at your own speed, where you are encouraged by somebody who is passionate about their subject, and where you are not working towards any qualification or exam. All the learning I have done up until then had always ended up with an exam, and that is a very stressful way to learn. And possibly the motivation isn't always the right one, whereas non-vocational learning, I think it's a really important part, or should be really important part of life. Yes, and I am totally supportive of that. That sort of community learning had provided me with enough portfolio and skill to then 3 years later be able to apply and get a space at the university. Yeah.
Okay, great. And so can you tell us then about where you went to university, and what that was like, and who you met whilst you were there?
I went to study at the University of Westminster. It was also known as Harrow Ceramics. It is, and it still is now, a very iconic course with particular reputation. And I was there between the years of 1995 and I graduated in 99. It was a hugely inspirational place to go to study, with tutors being all practicing artists such as Christy Brown or Mo Jubb, and Nigel Wood, who is absolute legend in glaze technology, was teaching technology and kiln building. But we also had some amazing visiting lecturers such as Edmund Deval and Sven Bayer, to just name but a few. It was the sort of environment where some teachers would teach you technique and some teachers would teach you practice, but nobody would kind of steer you in the direction of their own work. They would encourage you to carve a path for yourself, and that is really important in teaching art, I think. And I try to do this too in my teaching.
Yeah, it sounds like that sort of lack of ego, and sort of trying to teach a skill rather than a particular art form or a particular way of doing something. It sounds really refreshing, and actually, as you say, that's really brilliant that you've then taken that into the way that you like to teach. Now, as well as brilliant teachers, who else inspired your work?
So I must remember one artist who really kind of sparked me off at the very beginning, and she is a pianist and a singer, Diamanda Galas. She is quite a raw activist, and I was quite smitten by her performances and by listening to her music, and I kind of wanted to make pots in the same way that she performed, and sort of capture that energy and drive. When I started to study at university, I was introduced to work by Jim and Garia, and also looked at artists like Carol Schneeman and Judy Chicago and Cindy Sherman, feminist artists. And I kind of began to learn that as an artist, you need to reflect and reject dogma and authority and rely on your own agency. And I've kind of ever since then always tried to do that by making work which harvests energy and imprints meaning onto it.
Did you return to that work again?
Well, it was quite interesting. I left my first degree with two strands of work. One was salt glaze and more sort of intended for domestic use, and the other one was kind of very political and iconoclastic. And I have earned a disclaimer from the university for this work, but I did not return to it again. It was something that I felt, I think I had to get out of my system, and I know that I can do. I think the reacting and communicating through work in later years was done in much more subtle way.
Yeah, it sounds like that voice that you have as an artist. Yeah, you can kind of flex that in a different way throughout different periods of your life. But it's really interesting to hear kind of where it started and where it was born. Can you tell us a little bit about any particular challenges you've had as an artist?
So yes, there are always challenges when you for everybody. Sometimes the challenges are just kind of what life throws at you, and sometimes the challenges are just pure disaster, mostly done through fault of one's own. So I think lots of the challenges comes to, for example, very simple things like finding a space to work. And interestingly, first time I came in contact with Salisbury Arts Centre was when I was looking for space to work. After we moved from Cambridge, we came to live in Salisbury, and as I was already so deeply interested in ceramics, first place I was after was to find a pottery where I could learn some more, and where I could spend the time before going to university, which was about a few months. And I met the artist in residence there, Julie Ayton, who welcomed me in and let me do chores for her in exchange for using the workshop. So often these challenges become very amazing solutions. Another kind of challenge, I suppose, for me was when my marriage came to an end. And at the time I was studying my master's at Bath Spa University. And I think had I not been in the situation I was at, I wouldn't have got my first class degree. So I was able to switch off and focus entirely on this study. Some sort of anecdotal challenges. When I was talking about disasters, I think all potters have a few up their sleeve. And one of those was immediately after graduating, myself and my colleague Joseph Lynch set up our first studio. And it's quite a big expense. So you spend time applying for grants, looking for loans, finding premises, getting building materials. We were building salt kilns, so all the building materials for the kiln, fuel, etc. And amongst all of this preparation, we got our first batch of clay mixed. It was 2 tons to a particular recipe. And this recipe included originally 2.5% of red clay. And the manufacturer told us that they don't have red clay, that they would substitute it with 0.5% of iron oxide. I think if we had time to sit back and think about it rather than answering there and then on the phone, yes, do it. We had the knowledge up our sleeve. We just were too busy thinking about other things to kind of realize that that was not a good idea. So all this clay came with this 0.5% of iron in it. It was beautiful colored clay, nice and pink. And we made a first batch of work with it. And after taking it out of the kiln, we realized it was all denting and cracking, and it was in no way possible to use because by substituting the two materials, we have totally changed the nature of the clay, and it was very brittle due to the amount of crystallite that was formed in the clay body as the firing happened. So we then spent lots of energy making that clay, introducing more materials to it to make it workable. Those sort of things you do not need when you are just beginning.
Yeah. God, that's a challenge and a half, and I'm sure one that you didn't. It wasn't one that you repeated, perhaps.
No, definitely not. But I think lots of these disasters just kind of push you forward and make you work in a different way and teach you to slow down sometimes.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So have you had any sort of disasters or kind of or experiences like that with students when you've been teaching?
Yes, that is a particular story. I have invited university students to help me with a firing once, and the firing was successful. It finished, and the next day this particular student was leaving, and she was nagging me to say, come on, can we go and see the kiln? And I very reluctantly said, okay, let's go. So with a torch, I explained to her, the work is very, very fragile at this point. All we will do is open one little spy hole, shine a torch in, and you will see what you will see. So she says, okay. I said, whatever you do, do not open any other spy hole in the kiln. For some reason, I still don't understand it to this day. I've opened the spy hole, and she ran around the kiln and opened a spy hole directly opposite to me. And I could see the light through the kiln and her waving at me. And I knew in that moment that it's just going to be a total disaster. And yes, when I have unpacked the kiln, the entire back was cracked due to a thermal shock, which happened when she opened the brick on the other side.
Wow.
So that is a teaching disaster story.
It sounds like all of the science and sort of technology behind all of your work is so precise, and the attention to detail you need is amazing. You know, were you a big scientist when you were in school?
Definitely not. I absolutely hated chemistry. It meant nothing to me whatsoever. But surprisingly, when I started to study ceramics and I was able to apply the science, it then kind of gained meaning to me, and I could understand why it is that I am doing this. And from then on, things have really changed, and I became, in particular times of my career, really quite obsessed with technology. Lots of potters become material scientists. It is quite easy to get lost in the science and in the methodology that you might adopt when you are testing. And during my MA, I have conducted over 600 glaze tests because I was studying color theory and I was applying glaze technology and the aesthetic of glazes to color theory. Yes, and I became quite a kind of alchemist.
Yeah, It's as you say, it's amazing that once you find the thing that you really want to know about, then of course all of that science and all of that learning just clicks into place, and you're able to, it just makes sense, doesn't it? And it lands. Okay, can you tell us about any highlights within your work or moments that you're really proud of?
So I think I still remember really fondly the surprise that I've experienced when I was voted best student at the Hatfield House Art in Clay immediately after graduation. That really came to me as a surprise, and it kind of reaffirmed in me the notion that I was on the right track, because it was judged by peers. It was a magazine prize, and it gave me a push to work again, because as part of the prize I received a place at the show the following year. So real sort of leg up and impetus. But every time your work is selected for into a good gallery, into a good exhibition, you know, all those things are really, really very exciting and rewarding. Every time you work with people who push you some different direction, or, you know, all those things are really kind of, this is why artists are artists. Yes.
Absolutely, and actually you've sort of touched upon sort of collaboration there, you know, in terms of being able to riff off another artist. How has collaboration been important in your work?
So I haven't really had an opportunity to collaborate up until the time when I became an artist in residence in Salisbury Arts Centre in 2009. It was quite an eye-opening experience for me to come to an organization which had amongst its staff so many different creative elements, and starting up conversations with people who were filmmakers, people who were choreographers, people who were sound engineers, people who were light engineers. Was really so exciting, and starting to work with them on projects which combined elements of stop frame animation, photography, film, projection, dance, was really a new way of working for me. And I think what was exciting for me is to basically open up more or new potentials for ceramic practice by working with these people who are not traditionally associated with that discipline. And there have been some really exciting works made as a result of those collaborations.
It sounds like that time at the Art Centre with that team was really exciting and has left a mark on you, obviously. Now that your work is with Wiltshire Creative, how has your processes changed? How has your day-to-day changed, or is any of it the same?
So in the pottery, I would say business as usual. We are still running a very busy teaching program, teaching lots of wonderful people to make pots and be creative in clay. I also had a departure since Wiltshire Creative had been formed, and I started to work on a new body of work titled Earth Series. And in this body of work, I am utilizing all the knowledge which I gained in my master's research, but starting to use them in a very more fluid and expressive way, and trying to get in grips with geological history and how ceramic process mimics geological history in this new work. Totally new departure since Wiltshire Creative was formed for me was becoming a curator and the head of visual arts program at Wiltshire Creative. What I bring to the curatorial practice is the experience of being on the other side, being the artist. which kind of feeds into the way that I approach my exhibitions, and also the way that I conduct my relationships with artists. And being in this position and meeting so many exciting people had been hugely eye-opening and rewarding for me. It's a really exciting work to work on a program which considers so many different aspects: relationships with artists, relationships with the audience, the goals of the organizations. And I think I've really enjoyed putting together a program where we can showcase emerging artists, we can highlight issues and topics, as well as work with the local artistic community. And so far it's really been a roller coaster of figuring out, learning, and working on really exciting content.
Brilliant. It's lovely to hear about that. That's kind of in terms of your current role, that's sort of where your journey sort of is currently as an artist, and that you're still being an artist within that. So that's so lovely to hear. So can you tell us now what you're looking forward to once lockdown is over, which we hope, I'm sure, will be very soon?
So my family will be particularly pleased to get back their downstairs loo, which I have now turned into a very basic pottery studio. And we will be recording in there my first demonstration for this feature, so watch this space. But I am also looking forward to opening up the Art Centre with our summer open, and that decision had been taken that we will open with summer open, whatever time of year that will be. And it will be a great opportunity to invite artists who are based in Salisbury and in Wiltshire and in the counties around to exhibit their work in the Art Centre. So I'm looking forward to that.
I agree. I think it would be so lovely to be able to open the Art Centre again, open those doors again, and have a brilliant exhibition for people to come and see. Thank you so much again, Mirka, for your time, and it's been so lovely to hear about your journey to where you are today. As Mirka said, there'll be more content later on this week, including a demonstration from her home pottery. So make sure you look out for that. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening in today, and we will see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.